You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The views expressed by the individuals during this broadcast are their own opinions, and they may not be the same as those of their group or other organizations they may be involved with.
All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
Oh yeah, baby, that's lovely.
Good morning, it's July the 28th, and welcome to Psychedelics and Cannabis Educational News, your cannabis and psychedelic news source found here at paceradio.net. Good morning, Rev Cindy. How you doing today?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
I'm not doing too bad. I spent some time away with family over the weekend. Got to see them, haven't seen them for a while, so we got together and celebrated a 39th birthday. It wasn't mine, though. Unfortunately, I'm almost twice that age. Not quite, but getting there. And yourself, I saw your posts over the weekend.
Had a sad weekend, yeah.
A sad weekend, but you have lots of great memories.
I do.
Yes.
I do. I have extra years of memories too. Just so y'all know what we're talking about. I lost my elder dog. It was a little Yorkie on Friday.
Mm-hmm.
She was almost 17 years old.
Wow.
And she was a teacup. So making it to double digits was huge. Making it to 12 was unheard of. And she made it to almost 17.
17.
So I got a lot of bonus years with her.
You sure did.
Doesn't make it any less painful though.
No, it doesn't. And even if you're losing a dog who's sick, from other reasons, and ahead of time, it's not an issue.
Just because and you can prepare, and just because you get extra time and you can prepare doesn't mean you're actually prepared. So it was a very hard thing on Friday. So it was a weekend full of tears. I'm thinking of her and sharing some stories. I've had a couple of really great friends keep an eye on me over the weekend, messaging me every day and making sure I was okay. So
good.
That was nice to have too.
Yeah, the support team, as you could sort of call them.
Sorry?
A support team.
Support team, yeah. Of course. I mean, Steve, as everybody knows, our other host on this network, Steve, he a good friend. He may be out in BC, but every morning I got, good morning, sending hugs and love and sympathies and yeah. So it was nice. It was nice to have friends check in on me. And I know that my poor puppy, who was in a major amount of pain before we let her go, she's not in pain anymore. So
right. Yes.
And I just kind of have to hold on to that through the tears.
Correct. Yeah. All righty. Ready to change plans? We go on to get into the news for today?
Yeah. Let's do some distractions for Cindy.
Okay, let's get at her. Here we go. First story's up.
Coming to us from International Cannabis Business Conference. Introduction of cannabis decriminalization measures expected in Poland.
Nice. Always good to see countries adding decriminalization or legalization. Medical
Absolutely.
Cannabis policy modernization has spread across the European continent in recent decades, with most European nations now being home to some level of medical cannabis legalization, including medical cannabis commerce. In most recent years, adult use cannabis policy modernization efforts have picked up on steam on the European continent. Malta became the first European nation to adopt a national adult use legalization measure in 2021, followed by Luxembourg in 2023 and Germany in 2024.
Lawmakers in the Czech Republic also approved a national adult use cannabis legalization measure earlier this month, although the historic law doesn't take effect until January 1st, 2026. Additionally, regional adult use cannabis commerce pilot trials are underway in the Netherlands and Switzerland. One thing I will say about the Netherlands, they're very, very tolerant people, an amazing place to go visit. It may not be legalized there, but they don't care.
Right.
Another European country that is pushing for adult use cannabis policy reform is Poland, where national lawmakers are expected to introduce a measure in September that would decriminalize personal cannabis activity by adults.
Yeah, according to journalist Caper Roblinski, has learned that a parliamentary bill on the decriminalization of cannabis will be submitted to the Sejm in September. I'm assuming that's their parliament. Discussions are underway with the parliamentary caucuses, and efforts are underway to secure a majority to support the legislation, which is already in place, according to members of the parliamentary team responsible for drafting the bill. And it says the draft is ready. Individually, minor offenses may still emerge in the negotiations between cannabis or coalition partners and clubs. For example, the permissible amount of dried herb or cannabis. The regulations will be released soon, say Civic Coalition MP Markin Josfrak, a member of the parliamentary group of cannabis decriminalization, the outlet has stated.
What constitutes cannabis legalization versus decriminalization differs in Europe compared to the United States. Oregon became the first state in the United States to adopt cannabis decriminalization in 1973. Wow, I didn't know it went back that far.
Yeah.
Removing criminal penalties for personal cannabis possession of up to 1 ounce. Personal possession still resulted in a $1,000 fine in Oregon at the time. Oregon would later completely legalize cannabis possession in 2014, removing the fine. Compare that to measures adopted in Europe, which are often described as decriminalization, the removal of any penalty for adults possessing a personal amount of cannabis, such as what has now been adopted to multiple European countries, would technically be considered legalization in the United States. It demonstrates that there are some subjectivity in how adult use cannabis policy modernization is categorized on both sides of the Atlantic.
Regardless of how the measure that is expected to be introduced in Poland in September is described, if it is approved, it will be welcome change for the nation's cannabis consumers, including medical patients, who are having to navigate shifting regulations for obtaining medical cannabis patient approval. In its peak in 2024, Poland approved medical cannabis patient base was roughly 90,000. However, changes in the telemedicine regulations resulted in the patient numbers falling to about 33,000 by the end of the year, although that has since rebounded a bit in 2025. That's an awful huge drop in patients. They must have really changed things in order for that numbers to decrease like that.
Yep.
So, but yeah, as I said, we're going in there. It was good to see a location. We're always great to find countries where legalization or some form is going on. So let's get started with our next story. Here we go.
Coming to us from Cannabis Business Times. Turkish parliament legalizes low THC product sales in pharmacies.
Turkish parliament passed legislation on July the 20th that will allow licensed pharmacies to sell low THC products derived from hemp to medical patients with certain conditions. Although Turkish media outlets refer to the reform as medical cannabis legalization, the new law focuses on expanding the country's industrial hemp program from cultivation to a fully supply chain that includes cannabinoid processing, distribution, and sales of non-intoxicating products.
Regardless of whether it's called cannabis or hemp, access to cannabinoid medicines will be expanding in Turkey, where lawmakers in 2016 approved legalization or legislation allowing only for sublingual sprays like Sativex, which is not really that. It's nabiximols, a pharmaceutical that can alleviate neurological conditions, right?
Yeah, this Psychedelics is actually made out of some whole plant in there, but yeah, It's not
Interesting. Yeah. Currently, Turkey permits licensed industrial hemp cultivations in 19 of its 81 provinces, but more regions are expected to adopt cultivation programs under the new law, which is according to the Daily News there. Specifically, Turkey's industrial hemp production grew from 280 tons in 2020 to more than 1,700 tons in 2024, following a call by President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, okay, for farmers to ramp up the agricultural commodity.
I am calling out to my nation. Let's start the process to cultivate industrial hemp. Erdogan said in early 2019, we will see that industrial hemp has many different benefits in many different areas. Industrial hemp is primarily grown for fiber and grain, as hemp grown for cannabinoids like THC and CBD represents a separate market.
While Turkey's Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry will continue to oversee hemp cultivation and harvesting under the country's recently passed legislation, the Ministry of Health will have the authority to license and regulate hemp processing and pharmacy product sales to medical patients. Also, the Ministry of Health will govern new electronic track and trace system to help ensure compliance and safety. The Ministry of Health will also determine potential regulations around importing and exporting hemp. Turkish news site Haberler.com reported.
The new law amends Turkey's health-related laws and Decree Law Number 663, allowing for medical patients diagnosed with conditions ranging from chronic pain and epilepsy to cancer, multiple sclerosis, and certain psychological disorders like PTSD to study the low THC products. While Turkey is primarily in West Asia, it joins many of its European neighbors, predominantly Germany, in adopting more permissive cannabis laws.
Turkish Parliament member Leah Sain said the new law aims to enhance Turkey's competitiveness in a growing global sector, sparking potential economic growth through attracting international pharmaceutical companies, investors, and research initiatives. Those who violate provisions under Turkey's new law will find twice the sales prices of all products subject to the violation, with increased penalties for subsequent offenses. Well, that's an interesting way to find people.
Yeah, I know. I was just going, what? Hang on here. Well, historically, just so you know, Turkey has had strict drug penalties, including up to 5 years in prison for possessing cannabis, while those who traffic in illicit drugs face 10 to 20 years, according to the country's penal code. So it looks like they're making some changes.
Yeah.
And hopefully, the laws aren't as severe, the ones that they do retain, because they do retain some of those laws. They don't get rid of them all. So
yep.
All righty. So now we're moving on from Turkey, we're moving on over to the next country is
coming to us from International Cannabis Business Conference. Adult use cannabis policy modernization measure introduced in Slovenia.
I was hoping we could go for all stories here today, all legalization, but we got some good starters here. Lawmakers in Slovenia are continuing to push to modernize the European nation's cannabis policies, with a measure being recently introduced that would permit certain adult use cannabis activities. We are implementing the will of the voters, says Natasha Sukic, a member of parliament for the co-governing Left Party, this week in support of a bill introducing Parliament. Together, Prime Minister Robert Golob's Social Liberal Freedom Movement, per original reporting from this place. According to analysis, cannabis is no more dangerous than other already legalized drugs, such as tobacco and alcohol.
The proposed bill on private cannabis consumption, which may be revised again after a public debate, is based with some deviations on the regulations in Luxembourg, Germany, and Malta, the outlet also wrote. Below are reportedly some of the components of the adult use cannabis policy modernization proposal being considered in Slovenia.
Well, let's find out what they are. We always like this part. Individual adults would be permitted to cultivate up to 4 plants in private residences and a maximum of up to 6 plants in households where multiple adult residents live. Adults would be allowed to possess up to 7 grams of cannabis when away from their residence.
Okay.
Yeah.
I find that interesting when they're away from their residence.
So you're allowed 7 grams possession, like we're allowed 28.
Yes.
Or 30 actually. So yeah, go ahead.
Individual adults would be permitted to possess up to 150 grams of cannabis in their private residences with 6 plants, and a maximum of 300 grams in households where multiple adults residences. See, that's really not much. 150 after growing 4 plants, or 300 after growing 6. That's kind of crazy.
It is.
Yeah. Gifting cannabis to other adults would be legal in certain circumstances.
I wonder what those certain circumstances are. Now, selling cannabis and driving under the influence of public consumption will remain prohibited. A 3 milligram THC limit will be the maximum or minimum threshold for driving under the influence violations, and penalties would increase for violations involving 3 to 5 milliliters test results over 5 nanograms milliliters. So like only, well, we have 2 nanograms where we have notifications.
Wow. Yeah. Employers would be prohibited from testing their employees for cannabis use.
I like that one then.
I kind of like that one, yeah. The recently introduced measure in Slovenia is just the beginning of the political process, and certain provisions may be changed when the proposal reaches its conclusion. The introduction of the adult use cannabis policy modernization measure comes mere days after Slovenia's National Assembly approved a historic medical cannabis measure. And, it is just the beginning. I mean, as we know here in Canada, things will change over time. This is the foundation that they are saying we are going to build on. So changes over the years will be made and hopefully become better for the adults.
Yeah. Now, last year, Slovenia's voters approved both a medical cannabis referendum measure and an adult use referendum. The vote on medical cannabis received a 66.7% approval, with the measure being approved in every voting district in the country. The only other vote that received that level of unified approval in the European country was Slovenia's vote for independence. Wow. Now, additionally, the adult use measure received 51.5% approval from the Slovenian voters. While neither referendum vote was legally binding, it is clear that Slovenia's lawmakers have acknowledged the will of the nation's voters, and that is encouraging. It is when they do that.
When they listen, they're listening to their constituents, and that is the job of the government, is to make sure everybody lives happy, doesn't hurt each other, et cetera, things get fixed, but they're there to impose the will of the majority. And it's nice to see that happen. Yes,
exactly. All right. Moving on to our last story before we go to break. And here it is.
Yeah, I find this one interesting. It caught my eye. Coming to us from the TIE, this year's Canadian Psychedelic Summit, didn't even know there was one, emphasizes connection. Yes.
All right. Good stuff. See, you learn something every day. At a time when psychedelics are gaining mainstream momentum, the voices most needed in the conversation, often those least heard. For Kim Haxton, the Indigenous leader, land-based educator, and longtime guide in the realms of healing and justice, this gap is deeply familiar. My name is Kim Haxton. My family lineage is Potawatomi. I am part of the 60 Scoop from a community called Washashking, the place of the Shining Bay.
Haxton's work is not about trends or quick fixes. It's about something slower, older, and harder to commodify: connection. When she speaks of disconnection, it's not theoretical. It's the lived legacy of colonialism, extraction, and displacement. Her work, she says, is about helping people return to right relations with land, with spirit, and with each other. This summer, Hexton will be co-stewarding the Canadian Psychedelics Summit, hosted by the Hollyhock Leadership Institute, August 13th to 17th. This gathering is small, designed to be intimate enough for truth to emerge, for discomfort to be held with care, and for new relationships to take root. The setting on Cortes Island, where Old Cedar Forest meets the tidal shore, matters too. Hexton describes it as a container of the land, of the seen and unseen beings.
Yeah, she goes on to say it's about being grounded in a place on the island, slowing the moments down so the magic can happen. Being with the bioluminescence at night, the forest, the trees, the worlds around us. That's where the teachings are. Unlike many events in the psychedelic space, this summit is not about optimizing biohacking protocols or commercial strategy. It's about a community in the long, often uncomfortable road to true accountability.
Standing in solidarity means walking in action, says Hexton. Part of it means being open to other worldviews. She is clear about the contradictions at play. Plants that have been used by Indigenous peoples for millennia are now criminalized in their hands, even as others profit from their quote-unquote discovery. And in the rush to serve, she warns, too many people bypass the deep work of readiness. Amen, lady. That's why I am studying.
Too many people have mystical experiences and suddenly think they're ready to serve medicine. That's dangerous. Hexton's definition of accountability is expansive. It includes land, lineage, privilege, and power. It asks not just who's at the table, but how they get there and who was excluded along the way.
When we talk about equity, we need to look around the table. Who's there? Age, race, language, education, mental health, and diversity has many faces, protocols, and worldviews. At the summit, participants will hear from ceremonialists, researchers, community leaders, and artists, including Indigenous voices. Hexton hopes the gathering creates not just a moment, but a movement.
I'm always interested in building community. People who wouldn't normally meet come together. I hope we can help spark new projects, relationships, and initiatives long after we leave the island. For non-Indigenous people wondering how to engage with this work, respectively, Hexton offers guidance that is both clear and kind. Be open, be present, be humble, and don't get to say, teach me. Wait for the invitation, she says.
She points to resources like Yellow Hand Institute's Land Back and Cash Back reports and encourages support for community-led projects. One guest at this year's gathering, for example, is launching a youth arts program in their home country, an initiative that summit participants can help sustain. This is what relational place-based healing looks like. Not a single experience, but an ongoing commitment, one that recognizes the long history behind these medicines and the equally long work ahead.
We're in a time where there's high contrast, Hexton says. How can we move forward in a way that liberates all from different forms of oppression? Why not in the right relationship? Why not be in the right relationship? Why not make the choice to support, to learn, to show up in ways that actually help each other move forward? The rest, irradiation, integration. Yeah. So there you go.
Well,
August the
13th to 15th, 13th to 17th.
Yeah, there you go.
In Cortes Island, or I don't know exactly where that is, but somewhere in Canada.
No, I've never heard of it, to tell you the truth. So
I'm going to go look it up.
Do you look it up? Because we're going to go for break, and when we get back, you can fill us in. Let us know where it was. All right. As I said, we're going to break. Time to hear from those who help us inform our viewers. You're watching Psychedelics and Cannabis Educational News. We're found here at paceradio.net and 420pace.ca.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. Open Monday to Friday from 10 till 7 p.m. or by chance. Check out our flags, our t-shirts, plus our hats, and look of that supply of rolling papers, plus much more. We've got bongs and your favorite herbal vaporizers. Look at all the incense we have, as well as for those who collect knives, check out these knives in our collection. And while you're here, stop in to see Shay at the piercing room, where you can get poked by Shay. Daily deals, check them out. Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford, Ontario. Limestone City Hydroponics is Kingston, Ontario's hydroponics shop. Take your growing to the next level and create the optimal environment with a tent kit, or maximize your yield with an ebb and flow flood table kit. Either way, Limestone City Hydroponics has more sizes and options to fit your needs. Are you looking for the power of the sun that adapts to your budget? Then look no further, as they have professional grow lighting. They have indoor grow systems that are easy and cost effective, with many options to fit your living space and lifestyle. Cultivate your growing potential. We have everything you need to succeed. And if you can't make it to the store, they offer local delivery to the greater Kingston area. Remember, when you're looking for experts to help you grow, then look no further than the locally owned Limestone City Hydroponics, 105 Sunderland Drive in Kingston, Ontario. Call them at 613-548-0420. Rerolled Saturdays. Check it out. Nothing but non-stop cannabis and psychedelic programming. Find it at 420pace.ca.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
Hey, welcome back. Times two. Yeah, so you just popped in the chair in time, and she's back in order so we can bring you the second half of the news for today's show.
Like almost like I timed it perfectly. What?
Yeah, you did. That's why she's gonna make it back. No. If she does, she will be. She'll be there. So, all right. So we'll get started in the second half of the show, and I see that we're out of time, so that's good because we got two long stories coming up in this part. So here we go. Get started on
it. Coming to us from the Oz, giant cannabis seizure in New Brunswick by CBSA.
Canada's largest cannabis seizure since 2015 took place at the port of St. John, New Brunswick. The Canada Border Services Agency says the seizures took place back on May the 21st. Wow.
Interesting. CBSA officers, with assistance from CBSA intelligence officers from the Greater Toronto and Atlantic regions, examined a container destined for Scotland. Officers uncovered more than 6,700 kilograms of suspected cannabis, valued at $49.6 million. The cannabis, were falsely declared on documentation provided to the CBSA and were concealed in nearly 400 boxes inside the container.
CBSA officers at the container examination facility in St. John are responsible for examining high-risk containers and cargo arriving and leaving Canada. The quantity seized in this shipment was 3 times more than the total amount of cannabis seized by the CBSA across Canada in 2024.
The cannabis and evidence were turned over to the New Brunswick RCMP for further investigation. This historic seizure is the result of unified tactical plan and effective information sharing among CBSA officers and our law enforcement partners. This is said by Dominic Malate, who's the Atlantic Regional Director General for the CBSA.
And at Pearson Airport near Toronto, baggage handlers attempted a luggage tag switcheroo in a failed attempt to smuggle $147,000 worth of cannabis to France. 2 employees of Swissport Canada are accused of changing luggage tags, so an unknown traveler now appeared to own the suitcase containing 21 kilograms of illegal cannabis.
In late May, a French national arriving in Paris was detained on suspicion of importing cannabis from Canada. After further investigation, French authorities released the passenger without charges and referred the case to the RCMP at the Toronto airport, who uncovered the tag switching scheme. Police arrested 2 50-something men who each have more than 20 years of experience at Swissport. They are scheduled to appear in Brampton Court on August 6th and 8th.
Yeah, and Swissport's cooperation helped police nab the men, the RCMP say. The RCMP Toronto Airport Detachment members have been actively investigating cases involving baggage tag switching and attempts to smuggle illegal drugs and contraband out of the country, according to the inspector, John McMath. So there you go. Busted at the border. It's funny, they mentioned May, but yet the story just came out this week. Right?
Yeah.
So,
interesting.
Yeah.
There might have been, behind the scenes investigation. There's probably more people that are going to get arrested, maybe, in the receiving countries.
Yeah, and as we know, a news story can start on one day and different outlets let it out over the next week.
Yeah.
All right, on to the next story. Here we go.
Coming to us from Marijuana Moment, bipartisan coalition of 32 attorney generals pushes Congress to urgently pass cannabis banking bill.
Let's get this done. The bipartisan coalition of 32 state attorneys general from across the U.S. are calling on Congress to pass the cannabis banking bill to free up financial services access for licensed cannabis businesses. In a letter sent to the House and Senate leaders on Thursday, led by the Attorney General from Washington, D.C., Georgia, Maryland, and Ohio, the officials said they want to see the Secure and Fair Enforcement Regulations, which is the Safer Banking Act, taken up this session.
We are a bipartisan group of state and territorial attorneys general who, like you, have a strong interest in protecting the physical and economic well-being of our constituents while enabling economic growth and stability in our respective states, the letter says. We therefore urge Congress to advance this legislation, which will increase access to regulated banking and financial services for state-regulated cannabis businesses in jurisdictions that have legalized these businesses. It is increasingly critical to move cannabis commerce into the regulated banking system. The majority of states and several territories have legalized some use of cannabis, it says. And, as more states continue to consider and implement legalization efforts, the lack of access to America's financial system by cannabis businesses, which is a direct result of federal banking law, presents a considerable safety issue for the public.
Couldn't they just solve this by just making cannabis legal federally?
Exactly.
Yeah. The officials stressed that under current federal policy, many cannabis businesses are forced to operate on a largely cash-only basis, making them targets for crime and putting employees and customers at greater risk. Allowing access to the nation's regulated banking system is crucial to public safety and to ensuring that lawful businesses in our states have access to regulated banking services, they wrote.
Coming from Anthony G. Brown, today I joined the bipartisan coalition urging Congress to pass the Safer Banking Act. Legal cannabis businesses in states like Maryland are forced to operate in cash because of outdated federal rules, putting workers at risk and making it harder to collect taxes and enforce, If I show more, it's going to click up and enforce the law. The SAFER Act would fix that by allowing banks to serve these businesses safely and legally. It's a common sense step to improve public safety. I just went and read the whole thing.
Oh, okay.
There.
Well, where'd you go?
I went over to X. The letter also states that the current lack of banking access for the cannabis industry makes tax collection and oversight more challenging. And the Safer Banking Act would help ensure that state governments do not forfeit hundreds of millions of dollars in tax revenue that the cannabis industry generates.
Just legalize it. However, despite the attorneys general saying at the top of the letter that they're voicing their support for the Safer Banking Act of 2025, the bill has not yet been reintroduced this session. So it's unclear whether any provisions might be changed from the prior version that died at the end of last Congress. Now it says here in this big quote, to address these challenges, we request that Congress advance the Safer Banking Act or similar legislation. Congress should provide a safe harbor for depository institutions that provide a financial product or service to a covered business in a state that has implemented laws and regulations that ensure accountability in the cannabis industry. An effective safe harbor would bring billions of dollars into the banking sector, enabling law enforcement, federal, state, and local tax agencies and cannabis regulators in the states and territories to more effectively monitor cannabis businesses and their transactions. Compliance with tax laws would be simpler and easier to enforce with the regulated tracking of funds in the banking system, resulting in higher tax revenues.
The Safer Banking Act is a common sense, bipartisan, and will beneficially impact the safety of nearly 75% of Americans who live in a state where cannabis has been legalized. The letter concludes, the bill respects both state sovereignty and the current status of cannabis at the federal level. It does not encourage legalization, nor does it facilitate cannabis sales in states that have chosen not to legalize it. The Safer Banking Act simply addresses the specific public policy changes facing states in light of the federal prohibition on banking cannabis-related funds, and it does so in a way that will help move cash from legal cannabis businesses into the highly regulated banking system, where it will be more transparent to state regulators and law enforcement, it says. We look forward to working on this bipartisan issue with you.
If they legalize it countrywide, they could maybe say opt out, like we do here in Ontario with cannabis stores. Could they opt out statewide? Yeah. The other signatories on the letter are the attorneys general of Alaska, American Samoa, wherever that is, Arizona, California, Governor, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Hawaii, Illinois, Maine, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, Nevada, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, Northern Marina Islands, Oklahoma, Oregon, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, South Dakota, U.S. Virgin Islands, Utah, Vermont, Washington, and West Virginia. When legal cannabis businesses are forced to operate in cash, it's just not just inefficient, it's dangerous. Attorney General Chris Mays said in a press release, the Safer Banking Act is a practical solution that will protect workers and communities while ensuring Arizona can effectively collect taxes and oversee the growing industry.
Wow. That was quite a list you had to read off there.
It was.
Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel said that by reducing the risk of crime and improving tax compliance through access to regulated financial services, the Safer Banking Act has the ability to enhance both public safety and transparency. With billions in revenue, giving cannabis businesses a secure place to bank isn't just smart policy, it's common sense, she said.
It is. Colorado Attorney General Phil Weiser, meanwhile, says he's been urging Congress to allow cannabis companies to access the commercial banking system for years because of the safety risk many cannabis companies take on simply to do business. This common sense reform will also make it easier for Colorado to oversee the industry, better monitoring or better protecting consumers, public safety, and public health, he says.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the Democratic Senate sponsor of the cannabis banking bill recently said that despite efforts to coordinate meetings around the legislation, other priorities have taken precedence for now. Asked about recent comments, Senator Bernie Moreno, the lead GOP sponsor of the Safer Banking Act this session, who told Marijuana Moment that he doesn't expect the bill to come up until this fall. Senator Jeff Merkley said hopefully sooner than later in his mind.
In January,
Go ahead.
In January, the office of Rep. Dave Joyce, who is again leading the effort on the House, told Marijuana Moment that he would be filing the cannabis banking legislation this session, but that its introduction was not imminent, as some early reports had suggested. Yeah. And the leading anti-cannabis group recently sounded the alarm about a possible attempt to put the cannabis banking measure in the cryptocurrency bill that was advancing on the Senate floor, but that didn't come to fruition either.
No. With Republicans in control of both chambers and key leadership positions filled by opponents of cannabis legalization, it's been an open question about whether any cannabis reform legalization stands a chance of passage in the short term. That's despite the fact that President Donald Trump endorsed cannabis industry banking access, federal rescheduling, and a Florida legalization initiative on the campaign trail. However, he's been silent on the issue since taking office. On the House side, a Republican lawmaker said in March he's hopeful that the Congress will be able to get a cannabis banking bill across the finish line this session, arguing that the current barriers to financial services for the industry represent a second tier of prohibition. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I guess we only have a couple paragraphs left here. Cannabis industry banking challenges came up in several congressional hearings in March, including where senators on both sides of the aisles addressed the lack of financial services access for marijuana businesses. Well, if you guys all know about it and you don't like it, fix it, change it. Yeah. Come on. Like, it's just... Meanwhile, in January, congressional researchers released a report detailing the subject of debanking while making a point to address how the cannabis industry's financial services access problem sits at the nexus of a state-federal policy conflict that complicates the debate.
Yep. Separately, the Government Accountability Office announced in December that it's convening focus groups comprised of cannabis businesses to better understand their experiences with access to banking services under federal prohibition.
There you go. It's and you know, once they finally come down to agreement, I can just imagine how long it's going to take if they ever legalize it federally, how long it would take for it to be implemented. On top of that. So, all righty. We will move on to the next story because, you know, as you said, things can change. Earlier in the story, you mentioned how, this is a foundation. And then it starts from there. You make changes, improvements as things go on. So here we go. Next story.
Here we go. Coming to us from StratCan. Could the federal government's red tape reduction efforts help streamline the cannabis industry?
Well, hopefully. The federal government has recently launched a red tape review across the regulatory system, which could present opportunities for the cannabis industry lobbying efforts. On July 9th, the Treasury Board of Canada announced that over the next 2 months, ministers across various federal agencies will review regulations within their portfolios and take steps to remove outdated or duplicated requirements. The 60-day deadline for feedback will end a few weeks before Parliament returns following the summer recess.
Well, the agency notes that regulations are vital for safeguarding the health, safety, and security of Canadians and the environment. It also emphasizes that they must support a competitive and productive economy. by cutting this red tape. The Treasury Board argues Canadians and businesses can save time and money while still maintaining public safety. Regulations play a key role in protecting the health and safety of Canadians, but to stay effective, they must be regularly reviewed. And this is said by Shafkat Ali, who is the president of the Treasury Board, in a press release on this past July 9th. Cutting unnecessary red tape is essential to unlocking Canada's full economic potential.
This could include, for instance, actions to remove duplication or overlap with other jurisdictions, federal regulators, or within a regulator, and ensure that requirements are calibrated based on scientific evidence of risk to health, safety, security, and the environment, consistent with principles of the Cabinet Directive on Regulations. Streamline inefficient or complicated processes, including excessive paperwork or forms where these do not include meaningful benefits.
Reduce the burden associated with regulatory authorizations and project approval, such as permitting and licensing. Address outdated requirements and or better leverage modern tools and processes or adopt innovative solutions.
Enable the introduction of new products, services, and technologies into the Canadian market and support efficient and reliable supply chains within Canada and with trading partners. Strengthen service delivery, including opportunities to enhance predictability and clarity or improve the delivery of regulatory decisions.
Find operational efficiencies, including those related to inefficient compliance and enforcement mechanisms that create delays or uncertainty without improving outcomes. Representatives from the cannabis industry say they have been engaging with their federal counterparts to help highlight areas they believe the Minister of Health, who oversees Health Canada, the federal regulator in charge of the cannabis file, can identify some potential areas for regulatory streamlining.
Paul McCarthy, the president of the Cannabis Council of Canada, says he's cautiously optimistic, but notes the industry has been waiting on other changes the federal government has signaled movement on in the past. He says, it's great to see the government taking this initiative, but like anything, whether it is a success is dependent on whether it delivers meaningful change. We'll engage, but question number one is, where are you on the things that we have already been working on towards, like moving to a single national excise tax, for example?
The federal government included a consideration to explore a single harmonized federal access duty stamp as part of the red tape reduction measure outlined in its 2024 fall economic statement. One example McCarthy gives is that he believes could help Health Canada reduce bureaucracy in the current requirement for duplicative reporting from licensed producers, not only to different federal agencies, but also to provincial agencies.
He adds, I think a good example would be duplicative reporting. Licensed producers need to provide monthly reporting to both Health Canada and the CRA that is effectively the same information. Now, Pierre Leclerc, President and CEO of the Association Quebec de l'Industrie that's the AQIC, notes that the cannabis industry contributes billions annually to Canada's GDP and would benefit from more streamlined and business-friendly regulations.
It is important to recognize that the strength and long-term viability of hemp and cannabis businesses is critical to achieving the core public health and safety objectives of legalization, minimizing the harms associated with consumption by providing access to high-quality, rigorously regulated products and steering consumers away from the illicit market, wrote Leclerc in a press release. However, a range of regulatory, commercial, and fiscal barriers continue to undermine this process, perpetuating stigma and allowing the illegal market to persist. These challenges... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
These challenges include restrictions on product advertising, tax burdens that give illicit operators a price advantage, exclusion from government support programs, and difficulties accessing essential services such as banking and insurance, he added.
The 60-day period for ministers to review the respective files will end Friday, August the 8th. The next sitting day for Parliament is currently scheduled for September the 15th. The federal and provincial governments have been making efforts to reduce red tape and other barriers to economic opportunities in Canada, especially following U.S. President Donald Trump's effort to stroke a global trade war.
Several provinces have been lowering barriers to interprovincial trade for products like alcohol, although cannabis has continued to be excluded from those conversations. The British Columbia government recently announced some organizational changes that could impact the cannabis industry. The BC Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch will now have shared oversight between the Ministry of Agriculture and Food and the Ministry of Public Safety and Solicitor General, and the Liquor Distribution Branch, which oversees cannabis distribution in the province, will move from the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General to the Minister of Agricultural and Food.
Now, Alberta announced several changes to retail cannabis regulations through the red tape reduction in late 2023, including the introduction of cannabis sales at events and paring back specific regulatory requirements for retailers. Most Canadians see the cannabis industry as a positive economic contributor, or believe it could play a significant role in bolstering the country's future, according to a recent survey done by Advocates Data.
Yep. And the gross domestic product, the GDP, at basic prices for the legal cannabis industry in Canada continues to grow, highlighting the economic impact the industry has on Canada's economy.
All right, there you go. Thanks for the thumbs up, JJ. All right, we got one more story to go. Let's hope some of that red tape, hopefully do a red tape reduction thing here in Ontario, because there's some things that we'd like to see improve.
Yeah.
Look at some of the changes they're making in Alberta. They're making some big steps there that I think should be spread across the country, including more, right? As many people say, and it'd be nice to have consumption locations where people can go, right? So, all right, we got one more story to go to finish off the day, and it is ready to go.
Coming to us from Marijuana Moment, Texas voters want synthetic THC outlawed. Poll shared by proponents of reining in hemp industry funds.
Yeah, synthetic for sure. Bye-bye. Proponents of reining in the largely unregulated intoxicating hemp industry in Texas shared a new polling data on Wednesday, indicating that the majorities of respondents from both major political parties support outlawing synthetic cannabinoids, such as Delta-8 THC, and would rather obtain therapeutic cannabis products through a state-licensed medical cannabis program than from a smoke shop selling unregulated and untested hemp. The new survey comes as lawmakers who convened for a special legislative session this week reconsider products containing even trace amounts of THC and most other cannabinoids following a veto of similar legislation by Governor Greg Abbott last month.
Conducted in June by the group Baselice and Associates, the newly shared survey found 68% of Texas voters overall support ban on synthetic or lab-produced THC products, including 78% of Republicans, 56% of Democrats, and 66% of independents. Respondents were asked California or Kansas and Colorado have outlawed synthetic or lab-produced THC, with some respondents also told that Congress is considering a ban should Texas outlaw synthetic THC.
A second question posed a hypothetical. If you wanted to take something with THC in it to help with chronic pain, PTSD, or some other ailment, then would you rather get your THC products from a state regulated medical cannabis program with a doctor's prescription, or from a smoke shop selling unregulated and untested hemp? Among all respondents, 600 people in total, 72% said they would prefer a regulated market, 16% they'd rather go to a smoke shop, and 12% said that they were unsure.
By political party, 79% of GOP participants said they favored regulated medical cannabis dispensaries, as did 72% of Democrats and 63% of independents. The poll was circulated on Wednesday in a press packet as part of a news conference at the Texas Capitol, led by Senator Roland Gutierrez and the state licensed medical cannabis company Texas Original. A representative for Texas Original did not immediately respond to a question from Marijuana Moment inquiring about who commissioned the survey.
No one. None at Wednesday's. Oh, yeah, that seems odd. I think it's supposed to say no one at Wednesday's press event explicitly addressed the new polling data, though select charts were on display behind the speakers, who included Gutierrez, Texas Original CEO Nico Richardson, and a patient and doctor registered under the Texas Compassionate Use Program known as TCUP. Gutierrez says at the event that he personally has always been for a fully regulated medical cannabis program and recreational program like we have seen in Colorado, California, Washington State, and others. But he argued that in order to do that, we have to take the appropriate steps to regulate or ban synthetic hemp products and halt their availability to minors.
People at home need to be aware that there is zero age limit in obtaining this, he said. You can go to a convenience store right now, be a 14-year-old kid, and be able to buy a vape pen, and that's simply wrong. All science will tell you that a 14-year-old is not ready for the introduction of cannabis into their body. The senator continued. And so we need to do better. And by doing better, we need to find a bill that has some regulation.
Though the press conference was held just a day after a Senate committee advanced a new bill, SB 5, to outlaw possession, sales, and other activity around all hemp products containing any detectable amount of THC or any other cannabinoid besides CBD and CBG, none of the speakers mentioned the measure or specifically called for its passage. Gutierrez noted during a question and answer session that he voted in favor of SB 8 or 3, the hemp ban bill that lawmakers passed during the regular session and was later vetoed by the governor. But he claimed that was because he saw the measure as part of a trade-off in exchange for expanding the state's limited medical cannabis program, TCUP, through a separate bill that Abbott ultimately signed into law.
We need to do better for this program, he said. We need to continue the expansion of TCUP and continue to find a pathway for a completely regulated system, a tiered regulated system like we have for alcohol. Regardless, he repeatedly emphasized that he felt the current situation in which intoxicating hemp-derived products are widely available in the state is unworkable.
To do nothing, which is where we were when this veto began, is not an untenable situation for the youth of the state of Texas. We cannot have 13-year-old boys and 16-year-old girls, you name it, accessing cannabis with impunity. This might sound strange from the guy that always wanted to legalize cannabis, but we do have to do things appropriately and responsibly.
Richardson, the Texas Original CEO, made a case at Wednesday's press conference that the reason TCUP works and is trusted by physicians and immunocompromised patients is because it is highly regulated, allowing prescribing physicians and patients to be assured of a product's purity and potency. But he noted that stringent regulations in Texas cover the medical cannabis program, requiring that operators have badge access and surveillance systems at facilities, keep inventory in locked steel cages, pay to license and perform background checks on all employees, submit to state inspections, register products in advance of making them available to patients, submit to mandatory lab testing, and comply with a host of other rules.
Sounds familiar. By comparison, Richard says hemp-derived THC products do not have to abide by any of the regulations I just listed, even though most of the hemp products today sold in Texas are far more potent than what we are allowed to sell as teacup medicine. The upshot, Richardson and other speakers said, is that the untested, unregulated hemp products undercut licensed medical cannabis, ultimately putting patients up at risk.
No one should be surprised that a heavily regulated medical program cannot survive when it has to compete directly with an under-regulated recreational program selling the same or more intoxicating products, the CEO said. As lawmakers weigh whether to regulate intoxicating hemp products or ban them altogether, Abbott this week seemed to revise his own stance on the matter, apparently calling for regulated access to low THC hemp items for adults.
Asked about the proposal, the governor told local media that he stands in favor of doing all we can to protect the lives of our children while also protecting liberty of adults. So the structure of what I'm looking for is this, and that is, we must continue to criminalize cannabis in the state of Texas. No change in the cannabis laws, he says. We need to ban THC as well as hemp products for children under the age of 21. We don't want them to be exposed to that.
He added that the state needs to ban synthetics that are laced into hemp products that are extraordinarily dangerous. But once those safeguards are in place, the governor said, we need to have a highly regulated hemp industry to ensure that farmers are able to grow it, and that hemp products that do not have an intoxicating level of THC in it can be sold in the marketplace for adults to be able to use. Abbott gave a somewhat confusing definition of what he'd be comfortable with as far as allowable THC limits in hemp, saying there should be a 3% or 3 milligram cap, which is a meaningful difference. SB 5, on the other hand, would prohibit products with any quantifiable amount of THC or most other cannabinoids, explicitly exempting CBD and CBG from the ban. But the industry stakeholders say that that's logistically unfeasible and would disseminate the market.
To be clear, with regards to adults, again, with minors, no access to it at all. For adults, we do not want the THC level to be below 3%, or we're doing it in milligrams. 3 milligrams of THC, and it's called non-intoxicating levels of the hemp that would be marketed, he says. Abbott further said that every law enforcement official I've talked to has said the same thing, and that is they don't have the resources to regulate it. I didn't know the police regulated cannabis. I thought the government did. If they're measuring the hemp product, not based upon the current methodology, 0.3% THC, but on milligram basis, it's a whole lot easier to be able to measure it.
Again, it's not quite what SB 5 would accomplish, and stakeholders are voicing concern about the explicit legislative process and that it's moving through, urging supporters to contact their representatives and ask them to oppose the legislation. Even after hours of compelling testimony, the Senate State Affairs Committee voted unanimously to approve SB 5, advancing the bill to the Texas Senate for a vote. Heather Fazio, director of the Texas Cannabis Policy Center, said in an action alert on Wednesday.
She added that the Senate meets on Thursday and could vote on SB 5. However, she added that once it reached the House, representatives are much more inclined to support regulation. Separately, a spokesperson for the governor issued a statement that largely aligns with what Abbott described in his interview.
Governor Abbott has been clear that Texas must do all we can to protect the lives of children while protecting the liberty of adults. Hemp products should be banned for those under the age of 21, with a full ban on extraordinarily dangerous synthetic products, they said. Adults should be able to access heavily regulated, non-intoxicating levels of hemp, and there should be strict legal enforcement of hemp that exceeds 3.0 milligrams total THC per serving. The governor will continue working with legislature to establish a framework that meets these goals.
There you go. You know, when I think of synthetic, I think of, chemically produced. I know that they do this with the Delta 8. There's been good reports and bad reports on it. So
yeah.
Yeah, I'm sort of haven't made a decision on that stuff. So
I am of the thought that, I mean, they do blame Delta 8 with some deaths of some children. And I am of the thought is it's killed one, it's synthetic, let's just get rid of it.
get rid of it.
Real THC does the job we need to do. We do not need this Delta, whatever it is. Just leave the real stuff to do the job that it is intended to do, and let's not create things that can harm even 0.1% of the public. And
the way I look at it, it was created because they won't legalize the real stuff.
Yep. Yep.
Right? So, okay, anything before we say goodbye?
I don't think so. Have a great weekend, folks. No, have a great week. It's Monday.
Today's Monday. Correct. Exactly. That's all right. That's the news for today. We hope we found it educational and informative. Thanks to the Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, At-Eze.ca, and Limestone City Hydroponics.ca. And to reviewers, thanks for tuning in. You can catch our next broadcast this Thursday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And as I always say, don't forget to educate, medicate, and do not incarcerate.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The opinions of the individuals during this broadcast are their own, and may not be the opinions of their group or other organizations they may be involved with. All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more, we've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
Limestone City Hydroponics is Kingston, Ontario's hydroponics shop. Take your growing to the next level and create the optimal environment with a tent kit, or maximize your yield with an ebb and flow flood table kit. Either way, Limestone City Hydroponics has more sizes and options to fit your needs. Are you looking for the power of the sun that adapts to your budget? Then look no further, as they have professional grow lighting. They have indoor grow systems that are easy and cost effective, with many options to fit your living space and lifestyle. Cultivate your growing potential. We have everything you need to succeed. And if you can't make it to the store, they offer local delivery to the greater Kingston area. Remember, when you're looking for experts to help you grow, then look no further than the locally owned Limestone City Hydroponics, 105 Sunderland Drive in Kingston, Ontario. Call them at 613-548-0420.
We are people advocating cannabis education here at paceradio.net.